What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with this week's episode of Required Reading. Now, this week we have four articles. Again, they range, but they're rich readings, and I don't even waste any time. Let's hop into it. Now, the first article is titled There Is No Shame in Weakness, and this was in this week's New York Times by our brother Ian Marcus Corbin. It was on Sunday's editorial, and the headline is I think, as I always say, I always am drawn to anything that talks about vulnerability and how we deal with human relationship and isolation. And Ian does an amazing job. He kind of puts us in the shoes, or not so much in the shoes, but gives a perspective on someone who just recently had recovered from having a stroke. And though their capacity would allow them to speak, allow them to move and maneuver, a lot of their decisions to move, a lot of their decisions to speak, or their perception of themselves was driven by this view of shame. And overall, the article, which I think is just amazing and just quite poignant, it talks about part of what makes human beings distinct, what makes our species strong is the fact of our interdependence. It's not a point of weakness, but in our culture, in our hyper individualistic society, we look down upon our interdependence. And for me, as a social anthropology major, I love how he got near the end and talked about Margaret Mead and discussed, this question about what was at least the best evidence of human civilization. And one of the things she brought up was a 15,000-year-old femur that healed. And now, on the surface, you wouldn't think that this is something that would show evidence of human civilization. But one of the things it's shown is that in order for a femur to heal, someone, and especially in a hunting, gathering society, that you needed to move and have protection, there had to be a community around this person in order for allow it to heal and then for them to be alive. And so I think it was just a great way to end a great article, but something that I think is applicable to all of us, especially at a time now where we might find ourselves in a deeper dependence upon one another. And I think what this is pointing out is that this is our strength. So great article by Ian Marcus Corbin in this past Sunday's New York Times. The next article is, I think, a great one. I actually got tipped off to this a bit this week because I think our brother Diddy was celebrating his birthday, but he also talked about our beloved, one of the all-time greats of rap, hip hop, the notorious B.I.G, Christopher Wallace, being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, to be honest, I thought he was already inducted. you know, I mean, it was one of those things where you're like, this is overdue. But our brother Justin Tinsley in the Undefeated did an amazing piece on the 6th. And one of the things it talked about is looked at the album Ready to Die and then placed the album in context. Not only kind of just like walking through the story of his birth and then when his mother came to this country and what she was introduced to, but talking about, I think, something that I think a lot of us have known who are part of the culture, who have followed it and love it, is that how much rappers are truly the social commentators, and that they give a perspective that is not myth, but the reality of brothers and sisters in the projects and who kind of came up in that crack era. A lot of what is spoken through the lyrics that Justin pulls out in that amazing album is something that kind of speaks to the really real realities of a young man navigating and mediating in his experience in such broken circumstances, and at least the hope and the dream and the vision that came through in his rap. And so, as much as I'm excited, I'm truly excited about hearing this news that I think is quite overdue. I'm also just really blown away about being able to go back into the lyrics and just actually like, whoa, like this actually did connect in this way, or wow, this dropped at this time. It talked about even when the album dropped and how that even coincided even with the crime bill. It just a lot of parallels that Justin Tinsley does that I think is just worth anyone reading. And I think it gives you an insight into how interwoven rap is, the lyrics, how it speaks. So that's why there's such a strong following, such a reverence for these rappers. And if you're not part of the culture or you didn't necessarily follow, understand their lives, it's not humanized. So you hear the lyrics and you're not connected. So that's why I think this is great for everyone to listen to and read rather and listen to the album. But I think, but everyone to read and see just how I think masterful Justin is in kind of bringing his story to life in the context of the Ready to Die album. Um, this next article was just quite interesting, but not necessarily surprising. It's in this past week's The Economist, and it's called "The Pandemic May Be Leading to Fewer Babies in Rich Countries." Now, one of the things that they talked about that people undervalue has been how much the anxiety of the pandemic has often, for many people, has brought on a desire to like, no, I don't want to bring a child in during this time. Now, I don't think this is a surprise, particularly for, I know my sister and so many people who are at home having to manage caring for and teaching children and how much of a headache that is for many. But even those with resources across around the world are worried about being able to bear children in this time with uncertainty. Two, the idea of even bearing children and not having their husband be a part of that experience is something that has pushed people back. And so they even compared it to kind of when the bottom fell out in 2008 and how even the birth rates dropped, how this is almost like a couple of orders time larger. And how, for example, they now brought up that this idea with the idea as well as that you see in the poor is not just that time the supply chain of access to contraceptives, all of those things drive up the birth rates for those who are poor and for those who don't necessarily have the money to replace the contraceptives. You see that. But I just thought it was very interesting to think about because one would think that, oh, people are home, that if married couples, they'll be able to be able to connect a lot more and they'll be able to have kids. But I think this brings up something how important it is or how much uncertainty drives decision making. They've even talked about in some countries how they've actually started to institute grants, even more aggressive measures because they want people to have children. And so this is an interesting to follow, but I think it's interesting to think about some of the decision making criteria that people take into account, and also the impact it's having on policies around the country, around the world. And so we'll see where America lands if you're coming from the American context, but I think around the world they're paying attention to this quite closely. This next one is this past week. If you followed a little bit of my social media feeds, I've talked a lot about blue light and how one of just an opportunity to kind of really improve and optimize your wellness is looking to minimize your exposure to blue light. This is the light that is naturally emitted from most of the LED screens, our computer screens, our TVs. So many of these things emit blue light. And blue light is particularly unique because it suppresses melatonin. And melatonin is kind of like your sleep, your hormone, so to speak. And that affects people's sleep patterns. It affects their circadian rhythms. And this has looked into, will blue light glasses improve your sleep? Now, I have been one to invest in blue light glasses. I'm not gonna do the honor of putting them on like I did for for everyone on social media, but I felt the difference. But I think particularly you'll see in this article, "Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep" by Christopher M. Barnes. They talked about just the impact it has on work and how this is an opportunity for companies to invest in this because they said often what's tied to work, usually one of the greatest indicators, and there have been a number of startups that have come up in the space that is focused beyond just a whole vast array of corporate wellness benefits. One of the things that I think research and data has driven is how much sleep and how much that employers investing in their employees' ability to sleep well, not just in terms of workload, but also in terms of things like this, is helpful. And so in this study, it showed how those who had the blue light blocking glasses, how much they're able to sleep, and also how much of their capacity and output was improved. And so I say this from the context not to be pushing some next fad, but I think the data bears out how much of an impact blue light does have on people and their well-being. I think it also bears out that many people during this time they're exposed because they're working, or they're working and they're working late. And so I think this is something that an article I think this is helpful, is data driven. I think for all our kind of data wonks who love things that are empirical, not opinion, I think this is something that will be satiating for your mind around why this is important to invest in. And I think even the equipment and the blue light glasses that they're citing in here is quite expensive, but I think the cost is quite affordable to find you a pair that works for you, that will also not only help you get rest and be healthier, but ultimately help you work better. So again, this was in this past last week's not too a few weeks Harvard Business Review article by our brother Chris M. Barnes. Will blue light glasses improve your sleep? My experience has been yes. I think the data bears out yes. And so hopefully you get to enjoy and check out this week's required reading. But as always, I am welcoming any article you come across. I have to give a special shout out to my sister Mary Pryor, who looked out on one of the articles around blue light. But I welcome any and all articles and anything that you think people need to read. Definitely send them my way. But also would love to hear your thoughts about this week. So again, look forward to seeing y'all next week and talking about them. And take care. God bless.